If you live in the United States or in many parts of Europe and you've never had a vegetable garden before, or maybe you've tried a few times and nothing seemed to work, then there is a very good chance you're making the same mistake that almost every beginner makes. You start with the wrong vegetables. You buy seeds that look exciting on the packet. You choose crops that experienced gardeners talk about. You spend money on supplies. Then, a few weeks later, the plants struggle, pests show up, something dies, and slowly you start believing that growing food is difficult. I want to tell you right now that this is simply not true. Most people don't fail because gardening is hard. Most people fail because nobody showed them where to start. And when you start with the right vegetables, something very different happens. You begin seeing results quickly. The garden starts filling with green growth. You harvest your first vegetables sooner than expected. Your confidence grows. And before long, you're no longer someone who wants to learn gardening. You're actually doing it. Over the years, I've met many people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s who thought they were too late to learn. Some had never planted a seed in their entire life. A few months later, they were harvesting baskets of vegetables from small backyard gardens. The difference was never talent. The difference was choosing vegetables that teach you the basics while rewarding you with success. That's exactly what we're going to do today. I'm going to walk you through 5 vegetables that I believe are the best teachers in the garden. They are inexpensive. Their seeds are easy to find. They grow quickly. They produce a lot of food. Most importantly, they teach you skills that will help you grow almost every other vegetable later on. By the end of this video, you'll understand how to sow seeds, how to water correctly, how to spot common pests, how to harvest at the right time, how to prune when needed, and how a vegetable garden actually works without confusing terms or complicated methods. Some of the things I'll share today were shown to me many years ago by older gardeners who learned them long before expensive products filled store shelves. And one of these vegetables has a habit of teaching beginners more about gardening in just a few weeks than some people learn in an entire season. That's where we're going next. Before we get to the first seed, I want to explain something that took me years to fully understand. Most beginners think gardening is about growing vegetables. It isn't. Gardening is really about learning how plants behave. Once you understand that, everything becomes easier. The problem is that many people start with vegetables that demand perfect timing, perfect weather, perfect watering, and constant attention. Then, when something goes wrong, they blame themselves. I've seen people spend a whole season trying to grow difficult crops and end up with almost nothing to show for it. Meanwhile, another person grows a few simple vegetables and harvests enough food to share with neighbors. The difference is not intelligence or experience. It's choosing plants that want to help you succeed. One of the oldest gardeners I ever knew told me something I never forgot. He said that your first garden should teach you more than it feeds you. At the time, I didn't fully understand what he meant. Years later, I realized he was right. The best beginner vegetables are not necessarily the most expensive or the most exciting. They are the vegetables that show you how seeds germinate, how roots develop, how leaves respond to water, how pests appear, and how harvesting encourages more production. Every small success becomes a lesson. Every small mistake becomes valuable experience. This is why I always tell new gardeners to ignore fancy catalogs and focus on a handful of reliable vegetables first. Another mistake many beginners make is planting too much. They fill every corner of the garden on day 1. Then everything needs water at the same time. Weeding becomes overwhelming. Harvesting becomes confusing. The garden starts feeling like work instead of enjoyment. A much better approach is to start with a few crops that grow quickly and reward your effort. When you see those first vegetables appearing, something changes inside you. Suddenly, you want to learn more. You want to try another crop. You become curious instead of frustrated. And here's the good news. The first vegetable on today's list grows fast, costs very little, produces heavily, and teaches several of the most important gardening skills at the same time. In fact, many experienced gardeners still grow it every year even after decades of experience. There is a reason old gardeners trusted this vegetable generation after generation, and once you see how much it can teach a complete beginner, you'll understand why it deserves the first spot on this list. The first vegetable I always recommend to beginners is the humble radish. I know that might sound surprising because most people expect something bigger or more exciting. But trust me, if you've never grown vegetables before, radishes can teach you more in 1 month than some crops teach in an entire season. The reason is simple. They grow fast. Really fast. In many parts of the United States and Europe, you can see results in less than a week after planting. A few days later, small green leaves appear. Soon after that, you begin seeing real growth almost every day. For a beginner, this is incredibly important because it keeps you motivated. When people plant something that takes 3 or 4 months to produce food, they often lose interest before harvest day arrives. Radishes solve that problem. They show you that seeds actually work. They teach you how deep to sow. They teach you how spacing affects growth. They teach you how watering changes the quality of the harvest. And, perhaps most importantly, they teach patience without forcing you to wait forever. Here's how I usually tell beginners to plant them. Choose a sunny area. Loosen the soil with a simple hand tool. Make a shallow row about ½ an inch deep. Drop the seeds a few inches apart and cover them lightly. Then water gently. That's it. Most people overcomplicate this stage. Radishes don't need expensive products or complicated systems. They simply need moisture and sunlight. One thing many beginners don't realize is that radishes are also excellent teachers when it comes to watering. If the soil stays too dry, growth slows down. If the soil stays too wet, problems begin. After just a few weeks, you'll start understanding what proper soil moisture feels like. This lesson alone will help you with almost every vegetable you grow later. Another interesting thing is that radishes reveal soil problems very quickly. If the roots come out small, twisted, or poorly formed, the soil often needs improvement. In other words, the plant becomes your teacher. Even experienced gardeners use radishes to learn about conditions in a new garden bed. And while you're learning all these lessons, you're also harvesting fresh vegetables that can be eaten straight from the garden. But radishes are only the beginning. The next vegetable grows differently. It teaches an entirely different set of skills. It produces for much longer, gives larger harvests, and introduces you to one of the most important concepts in gardening that many beginners completely misunderstand. The second vegetable I always recommend is bush beans. If radishes teach you how seeds and soil work, beans teach you how productive a garden can become when you give a plant what it needs. This is often the moment when beginners stop thinking of gardening as an experiment and start seeing it as a real source of food. I still remember the first time I grew beans many years ago. I planted a small row because I wasn't expecting much. A few weeks later, I was carrying bowls of beans into the house every few days. That's when I learned an important lesson. Some vegetables don't just give you one harvest. They keep giving if you treat them properly. Bush beans are perfect for beginners because the seeds are large and easy to handle. You don't need perfect eyesight or years of experience to plant them. Make shallow holes about 1 inch deep. Leave a little space between seeds. Cover them with soil and water gently. Then nature does most of the work. Within a short time, you'll see strong seedlings pushing through the ground. One thing I love about beans is that they teach you observation. Most beginners water on a schedule instead of paying attention to the plants. Beans quickly show you why that approach doesn't always work. On cooler weeks, they need less water. During hot periods, they need more. By watching the leaves and growth, you begin understanding how plants communicate their needs. This is a skill that becomes valuable for every crop you grow later. Beans also introduce you to pollination. When flowers appear, many beginners become nervous because they think every flower will immediately become a bean. Sometimes it takes a little time. Bees and other pollinators help the process. Watching flowers slowly turn into harvestable beans is one of the simplest ways to understand how fruiting vegetables work. Another lesson comes during harvesting. Most people make the mistake of waiting too long. Older gardeners showed me years ago that regular harvesting encourages more production. The more beans you pick, the more the plant tries to produce. Very few beginners know this at first. They wait, the beans become oversized, and production slows down. Learning this simple habit can dramatically increase your harvest. Before long, you'll have enough beans for meals, freezing, or sharing with friends. And while all of this is happening, you're quietly learning about watering, pollination, harvesting, plant health, and garden timing. But the next vegetable on this list teaches something completely different. In fact, it introduces one of the most useful skills in gardening and helps beginners understand pests, pruning, and continuous harvesting all at the same time. The third vegetable I recommend to almost every beginner is zucchini. Some people call it summer squash, but whatever name you use, this plant has earned its place in countless gardens for one simple reason. It is incredibly generous. In fact, one of the funniest mistakes beginners make is planting too many zucchini plants. They imagine each plant will produce only a few vegetables. Then a few weeks later they're giving zucchini to neighbors, friends, and family because the harvest keeps coming. That's one reason older gardeners often joke that one zucchini plant is enough for a small family. But beyond the harvest, zucchini teaches several important gardening skills that every beginner needs to learn. First, it teaches spacing. Many new gardeners want to fit as many plants as possible into a small area. Zucchini quickly shows why that doesn't work. The leaves become large. The plant spreads. Air circulation becomes important. When plants are crowded together, moisture stays trapped and problems can appear. Learning proper spacing with zucchini will help you avoid mistakes with many other vegetables later. The second lesson is pest awareness. Most beginners imagine pests appear suddenly and destroy everything overnight. In reality, successful gardeners simply learn to check their plants regularly. Zucchini makes this easy. Every few days you can look under the leaves and inspect the stems. If something unusual appears, you catch it early. This simple habit is one of the biggest differences between frustrated gardeners and successful ones. Another valuable lesson comes from pruning. Now, zucchini does not require complicated pruning, but occasionally older leaves near the bottom can be removed if they become damaged or unhealthy. This teaches beginners that pruning is not about cutting randomly. It's about helping the plant stay productive and healthy. I was taught this many years ago by an older gardener who always said that every cut should have a purpose. That advice has stayed with me ever since. Zucchini also introduces you to harvesting at the right moment. Many beginners wait too long because they think bigger means better. Usually the opposite is true. Smaller zucchini are often more tender and encourage the plant to continue producing. Harvest regularly and the plant rewards you. Wait too long and production slows down. By the time you've grown zucchini for one season, you've learned spacing, pest monitoring, plant health, pruning, and harvest timing. And the next vegetable on our list may be even more valuable because it teaches beginners how to handle one of the most important parts of gardening that many people struggle with during their first year. The fourth vegetable I would put into every beginner's garden is leaf lettuce. Now, this may not sound as exciting as tomatoes or peppers, but don't underestimate what lettuce can teach you. In fact, some of the best gardeners I know still grow lettuce every single year because it helps them understand timing, succession planting, harvesting techniques, and one of the most important principles in gardening. The principle is this: a garden should not produce food only once. It should produce food continuously. Most beginners plant everything on one day and then wait for a single harvest. Lettuce teaches a completely different approach. You can plant a small row today, another row a couple of weeks later, and another after that. This simple habit creates a steady supply instead of one large harvest followed by nothing. It is one of the easiest ways to make a garden feel productive for months rather than weeks. Planting lettuce is simple. The seeds are small, so many beginners make the mistake of burying them too deeply. Years ago, an older gardener showed me that lettuce seeds need only a light covering of soil. That small lesson alone saved me from many failed plantings. Once the seedlings emerge, you begin learning another important skill: thinning. Most beginners hate removing seedlings because it feels wasteful. But when plants are overcrowded, none of them perform well. Learning to give plants enough room is one of the hardest lessons for new gardeners, and lettuce teaches it gently. Then comes harvesting. Instead of pulling the entire plant, you can often harvest outer leaves while allowing the center to continue growing. This simple method surprises many beginners. They discover that one planting can provide multiple harvests. Suddenly, the garden starts producing food week after week with very little effort. Lettuce also teaches observation during hot weather. You learn how temperature affects growth. You begin noticing how sunlight, moisture, and timing influence the quality of the harvest. These observations prepare you for more demanding vegetables later. By now, you've learned about seeds, watering, spacing, harvesting, pruning, pollination, pests, and continuous production. You're already building the skills needed to grow almost anything. But there is still one final vegetable left on this list, and, in my opinion, it may be the most important teacher of all because it brings together nearly every lesson we've talked about today and prepares you for the next stage of your gardening journey. The fifth and final vegetable I recommend for beginners is the cucumber. If you've made it this far and planted the other vegetables we've talked about, cucumbers become the perfect next step because they bring together almost every skill you've already learned. They grow quickly, produce heavily, and give you a chance to understand how a vegetable behaves throughout an entire season. One of the first things cucumbers teach is support. Many beginners let them spread across the ground, which works, but a simple trellis often makes harvesting easier and helps keep fruits cleaner. Watching cucumber vines climb upward is one of those small gardening moments that never gets old. It also teaches you how plants naturally search for light and space. Cucumbers help you become better at watering as well. Their large leaves lose moisture quickly during hot weather, and they respond fast when conditions are not ideal. After growing cucumbers for a season, most beginners become much better at understanding when plants actually need water and when they don't. They also teach patience during flowering. At first, you'll see flowers appear. Then you'll notice that not every flower immediately becomes a cucumber. This is another valuable lesson about pollination and plant development. Before long, tiny cucumbers begin forming where flowers once were, and each day they seem a little bigger than the day before. Harvest timing becomes important too. Many beginners wait too long and end up with oversized fruits that are less enjoyable to eat. Picking regularly keeps production moving and encourages new growth. This simple habit is something you'll carry into almost every future crop you grow. And that's really the point of everything we've talked about today. Radishes teach seeds and soil. Beans teach productivity and harvesting. Zucchini teaches spacing and pest awareness. Lettuce teaches continuous production. Cucumbers bring those lessons together and prepare you for more advanced vegetables like tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, melons, and many others. If you start with these 5 vegetables, your garden can fill surprisingly fast while teaching you skills that normally take years to develop. You'll spend very little money, make fewer mistakes, and gain confidence with every harvest. Most importantly, you'll discover that growing food is not some complicated skill reserved for experts. It's something ordinary people can learn step by step. And once you've harvested your first successful garden, you'll start looking at every empty corner of your yard differently. Because that's usually when gardeners begin asking the question that changes everything. What should I grow next season?